When we talk about prayer, most people approach it as if it's a transaction. They see it as this back and forth, almost like a business deal with God. Lord, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. Or they treat prayer like a vending machine. You put in a request and you expect an instant answer. And when that answer doesn't come right away, the natural tendency is to get frustrated, maybe even to question if prayer works at all. But prayer was never meant to be a bargaining tool. Prayer is not a transaction. It's a declaration of trust. When you bow your head, when you open your mouth, when you let your spirit cry out, what you're really saying is, God, I trust you. I trust that even if I don't see the answer yet, you've heard me. I trust that even if the circumstances don't shift overnight, you're still working behind the scenes. I trust that even if life feels heavy, my prayer is lifting something beyond my sight. That's the power of prayer. It's not always about changing the situation. It's about changing the posture of your heart. Think about it. Every time you pray, you're declaring something bigger than yourself. You're admitting that you don't have all the answers, you don't have all the control, and you don't have the strength to carry it alone. That act right there is one of the most liberating things a human being can do. Because the truth is, control is an illusion. You and I can't control life. Life will throw storms, setbacks, disappointments. But in prayer, you hand over that illusion of control, and in exchange, you gain real peace. That's why prayer isn't just spiritual, it's psychological. It reduces the weight of anxiety, because it reminds your mind that you are not carrying the burden alone. Now, here's where it gets deep. Trust in prayer means you shift your perspective from outcomes to alignment. See, when you pray with a transactional mindset, you're only focused on what you can get. But when you pray with trust, you're focused on who you're becoming in the process. You're aligning yourself with God's will, His wisdom, and His vision. That's when prayer stops being a checklist and starts being a conversation. And when you start to converse with God, you stop begging and start believing. Some of you have been praying and saying, God, I need this breakthrough. I need this door to open. And maybe the door hasn't opened yet. But what if the delay is actually the preparation? What if the unanswered prayer is God aligning the timing, shaping your character, and building your endurance? If you only see prayer as a quick fix, you'll miss the deeper work it's doing inside you. But if you see it as a declaration of trust, you'll understand that every time you pray, you're reinforcing your faith muscle. Let me put it this way. Prayer is like planting a seed. You don't drop the seed in the ground and dig it up the next morning asking, why hasn't it grown yet? You water it, you nurture it, and you trust that the process is happening beneath the soil. That's what prayer is. It's planting the seed of faith and trusting that God is working beneath the surface, in ways you cannot see, in a time you cannot dictate. Psychologically, this kind of trust rewires the mind. It teaches patience. It builds resilience. It creates a sense of peace that no outside circumstance can shake. Philosophically, it reminds us of our limitations as human beings and the necessity of leaning on a power greater than ourselves. Spiritually, it ignites faith, which is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When you truly trust in prayer, you stop monitoring the clock. You stop measuring God's faithfulness by your deadlines. Instead, you start walking with assurance. You wake up with a different energy, because even if nothing looks different on the outside, something has shifted on the inside. You stop asking, when will God move? And start declaring, God is moving. And that declaration, that's the power of prayer. Because when you declare trust, you align yourself with divine flow. You open your eyes to see opportunities you would have overlooked. You recognize blessings you would have dismissed. You endure trials with a strength you didn't know you had. Prayer doesn't just change things, it changes you. And when you are changed, your world begins to change. So the next time you pray, don't pray like you're standing in line waiting for your order to be filled. Pray like you're making a declaration, a declaration that says, I believe, I trust, I know that my words are not bouncing off the ceiling, they're touching the throne. Because the moment you pray with that kind of trust, you'll find that you don't just hope God will move, you know He already has. One of the greatest challenges in prayer is dealing with what feels like silence. You've prayed, you've cried out, you've laid it all before God, and yet nothing seems to happen. The door doesn't swing open, the situation doesn't shift, the answer doesn't come when you expect it. And it's in that space, the space between the prayer and the manifestation, that many people lose heart. They start to think, maybe God didn't hear me, maybe He doesn't care, maybe prayer just doesn't work. But here's the truth, delay is not denial. God moves in His timing, not ours. That idea alone changes everything. Because let's be real, most of us are conditioned for immediacy. We live in a culture of instant gratification. We don't even wait for food anymore. We tap a screen, and it arrives at the door. We don't wait to learn, we type a question and get the answer in seconds. So naturally, we carry that mindset into prayer. We assume that if God doesn't respond on our timetable, then something must be wrong. But faith doesn't work like that. Prayer is not about controlling God's clock. It's about trusting His wisdom. See, God operates with a perspective we can't comprehend. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end all at once. He knows what needs to be shifted, what needs to be built, what needs to be prepared before your answer arrives. If He gave it to you too soon, it could harm you. If He gave it to you before you were ready, you might lose it. Delay is often the evidence of divine strategy. Think about it this way. When you order something valuable online, you don't expect it to arrive the next second. You understand it's in transit, being processed, being handled with care. Prayer is the same. When you pray with trust, you've placed your request into divine hands. The answer may be in motion, but it may not be ready for delivery yet. And here's the powerful part. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Psychologically, waiting builds resilience. It tests your patience, yes, but it also strengthens your character. When you wait and still hold on to your faith, you develop an inner toughness that can't be shaken by circumstances. Philosophically, delay reminds us that we are not the ultimate authority over time. It humbles us. It teaches us to surrender to something greater. Spiritually, delay sharpens your faith. It forces you to believe even when there's no evidence yet. That's the definition of trust. I remember hearing someone say, God is never late, but He's rarely early. And that's true. His timing often comes right at the point where you thought it was too late. That's when the breakthrough happens. That's when the answer shows up. Why? Because God's timing isn't just about you. It's about aligning circumstances, people, and opportunities in a way that maximizes the outcome. Sometimes your delay is tied to someone else's preparation. Sometimes it's tied to doors that need to close before the right one can open. If you could see the full picture, you'd understand the weight. But here's the real test. Can you keep believing in the silence? Can you trust the delay without letting doubt eat away at your faith? Because trust isn't proven in the answered prayer, it's proven in the unanswered one. Anybody can celebrate when the blessing comes, but it takes real faith to say, I still believe. When nothing has changed yet, that's the kind of trust that moves heaven. Think about a child asking a parent for something. If the parent says, not yet, it doesn't mean the parent is cruel. It often means the child isn't ready or the timing isn't right. The same principle applies with God. He's not withholding to punish you. He's delaying to protect you, to prepare you, to position you. And when the right time comes, it won't just be an answer, it'll be the perfect answer. So here's the challenge. Stop mistaking God's silence for absence. Stop interpreting delay as denial. Trust the process, even when it feels slow. Because the truth is, every prayer is heard. Every word you speak in faith is recorded, and every delay has a purpose. The key is to hold steady long enough to see it unfold. When you really grasp this, you stop living in frustration. You stop pacing the floor asking when, and instead start declaring, "I know it's coming." That shift changes your spirit. It gives you peace in the waiting, strength in the silence, and hope in the delay. Words have power. What you speak in prayer is not just sound disappearing into the air, it's energy shaping your reality. A lot of people underestimate this truth. They think prayer is just reciting words, repeating phrases, or going through some spiritual ritual. But the words you choose in prayer are declarations that program your mind, direct your spirit, and influence the way you perceive life. When you say something over and over, you are training yourself to believe it. And once you believe it, you begin to live it. Think about how the human mind works. Psychologists will tell you that our thoughts and words create patterns in the brain. Neuroscience shows us that repeated thoughts actually carve out pathways, and the more you walk that mental path, the stronger it becomes. So when you pray with conviction, when you speak words of faith instead of fear, you're literally rewiring your brain to think in alignment with hope instead of despair. Prayer doesn't just move heaven, it reshapes your inner world. Here's where it gets deeper. Words are not neutral. Every word carries weight. If your prayers are full of doubt, fear, and negativity, then even as you're praying, you're reinforcing uncertainty in your spirit. But if your prayers are rooted in trust, gratitude, and confidence, you're strengthening the foundation of faith inside of you. That's why it matters how you pray. Don't just pray problems, pray solutions. Don't just pray fear, pray faith. Because what you speak, you start to see. Let's be real. Many of us sabotage our own prayers with the words we use after we say amen. We'll pray, "Lord, I trust you for this breakthrough," and then turn around and say, "But honestly, I don't think it's going to happen." Do you realize what just happened? You canceled the power of your own declaration. Your words outside of prayer matter just as much as your words in prayer. Faith doesn't end when you stop praying. It continues in the way you speak about your life afterward. This is why the Bible says that life and death are in the power of the tongue. That's not just a spiritual statement. It's psychological truth. The language you use creates the frame through which you interpret your world. If you keep declaring, "I'll never get ahead, I'll never find love, I'll never be free from this struggle," then you're reinforcing limitation. But if you start declaring, "I am favored, I am guided, I am equipped, I am covered," your mind begins to align with that reality and your actions follow. That's why prayer matters. It's not just communication with God, it's reprogramming for your own soul. And listen, this doesn't mean you deny reality. Trust doesn't mean ignoring the struggle. It means acknowledging the struggle while declaring a higher truth. You can say, "Yes, I'm in a storm, but God is my anchor." You can say, "Yes, I'm hurting, but I believe healing is on the way." That balance of honesty and faith is where real power lies. You're not pretending. It's not fake positivity. It's declaring that the struggle is not the final word. Philosophically, this is profound because it shows us the role of human speech in shaping reality. Words bridge the gap between thought and action. They are the carriers of intention. And prayer is the highest form of speech because it directs your intention toward God and toward the possibilities of faith. To pray is to speak life into existence before it exists. Here's the challenge I want you to take seriously. Listen to your own words, not just when you pray, but when you speak about your life. Are you reinforcing fear or are you reinforcing faith? Are you declaring lack or are you declaring abundance? Because your words are either pulling your prayers forward or pushing them back. I've seen people pray for years and nothing changes, not because God didn't hear, but because their words and their beliefs kept canceling the seed of faith. You can't pray one thing and speak another. Your words outside of prayer need to align with your words inside of prayer. That's where trust is proven, not just in the request, but in the consistency of your declaration. So the next time you pray, remember this: you're not just talking, you're shaping. You're shaping your perspective, your choices, and your destiny. Speak faith, speak gratitude, speak victory even before you see it. Because when your words are consistent with your trust, you start walking into the reality you've been praying for. If you can discipline your tongue to align with your prayer, you'll discover that your words don't just describe your life, they create it. And once you believe that, you'll stop speaking defeat and start declaring victory, until the world around you begins to match the faith within you. Faith is powerful, but faith without patience is fragile. You can have all the belief in the world when you first pray, but if you can't wait, if you can't endure, that belief will crack under pressure, and this is where so many people fall short. They start out strong, praying, trusting, believing, but when the answer doesn't come quickly, their faith begins to wither. That's because patience isn't just a side piece to prayer. Patience is the backbone that holds your faith together. Think about it. Patience is not passive. It's not sitting around doing nothing while you wait. Real patience is active trust. It's choosing, every single day, to keep believing even when the evidence isn't there yet. It's waking up and saying, I still believe God is moving, even though nothing in your life looks different. That kind of patience is a discipline. It's a mental and spiritual workout. And just like muscles, your patience only grows when it's tested. Now, I want you to see how deep this goes psychologically. Human beings are wired to want immediate results. We're naturally impatient because our brains crave resolution. That's why waiting feels uncomfortable. It creates tension. But in that very tension is where growth happens. Patience stretches your capacity to handle uncertainty. It forces you to develop endurance, and the longer you endure, the stronger your faith becomes. Without patience, faith is just a spark. With patience, faith becomes a fire that cannot be put out. Philosophically, patience reminds us that life is not lived on our schedule. We like to think we can plan everything out, but reality doesn't bend to our timeline. Patience teaches humility. It reminds us that we are not in control of everything, and that surrender is necessary if we want to walk in peace. When you truly embrace patience, you stop fighting the clock. You stop questioning every delay. Instead, you begin to live in alignment with divine timing, which is always better than your own. Here's what most people miss. Waiting is not wasted time. Waiting is shaping time. Every season of waiting is molding you for the blessing you've been praying for. If you can't be patient, you won't be ready. Imagine asking for strength, but then running from the struggle that would build it. Imagine asking for wisdom, but rejecting the lessons that come through experience. Patience ensures you don't skip the process, and the process is what makes you strong enough to handle the promise. Let me make it plain. Patience is like the roots of a tree. Nobody sees the roots, but they are what anchor the tree when storms come. If a tree grows too fast without strong roots, the first wind will knock it down. That's what happens when you try to force the timing of your life. You might get the thing you prayed for, but without patience, without depth, without roots, you won't be able to sustain it. God allows patience to develop in you so that when the blessing comes, you're not just excited, you're prepared. Now, I know patience isn't easy. It requires discipline to keep speaking faith when your situation screams otherwise. It requires strength to keep waiting when people around you are moving ahead. But here's the truth. What God has for you is tailor-made for you. It can't be rushed, and it can't be stolen. If you try to run ahead of His timing, you may end up with something that looks good but isn't right. Patience keeps you in alignment with what's truly meant for you. And I'll tell you something else: patience is attractive to God. When you wait with trust, you're saying, God, I don't just want what you can give me, I want you. That's a deeper kind of faith. That's faith that isn't chasing blessings but is resting in the blesser. And when you reach that level, when your patience is anchored in trust, God knows He can trust you with more. So here's the challenge. Don't let impatience weaken your prayer life. Don't cancel your own breakthrough because you couldn't wait. Trust that the delay has a purpose. Trust that patience is building something in you that instant results never could. And remember, every day you wait in faith, you are proving that your belief is not shallow. It's strong, it's deep, and it's unshakable. When most people pray, they expect God to show up in a dramatic way. Lightning from the sky, a sudden miracle that flips everything around in an instant. And yes, God can move like that, but here's the reality. Most often, God doesn't move in the spectacular. He moves in the ordinary. He moves through people, through circumstances, and sometimes even through the very obstacles you wish He would remove. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss the movement of God because you were too busy waiting for something flashy. See, trust in prayer isn't just about believing God heard you. It's about staying open to how He might answer. Because the truth is, God rarely answers prayers in the way we imagine. You pray for strength, and instead of zapping you with supernatural power, He sends a challenge that forces you to grow stronger. You pray for wisdom, and instead of dropping knowledge into your lap, He places you in situations that demand discernment. You pray for deliverance, and sometimes the deliverance comes not by removing the storm, but by giving you peace in the middle of it. That's God moving, just not always the way you expected. Psychologically, this is huge. When we set rigid expectations for how things must unfold, we narrow our awareness. The brain literally filters out everything that doesn't match the picture we've created. That means you can miss opportunities, helpers, or answers standing right in front of you because you're fixated on one idea of what the solution should look like. Prayer calls us to expand that awareness. Trust calls us to open our minds and hearts to the possibility that God's answer might come wrapped in packaging we didn't recognize. Philosophically, this is about humility. It's about admitting that we don't always know the best way forward. Our vision is limited, but God's is limitless. What looks like an obstacle to us may actually be an instrument in His hands. What feels like a setback may actually be a setup. When you truly trust, you don't just look for God in the obvious victories. You start seeing Him in the struggles, the interruptions, and even the detours. Let me give you an example. Think about some of the toughest seasons in your life. At the time, you probably thought, "Why am I going through this? Why won't God just fix it?" But when you look back, you realize those very seasons shaped you. They introduced you to people you never would have met otherwise. They built resilience, character, and perspective. That wasn't wasted time. That was God moving through the very thing you thought was blocking you. Here's the challenge. Don't put God in a box. Don't assume the only way He can answer your prayer is through a sudden breakthrough or a perfect opportunity falling in your lap. Sometimes the breakthrough is hidden inside the breakdown. Sometimes the opportunity shows up disguised as extra work or even as rejection. You prayed for doors to open, and maybe God let one slam shut because that wasn't your door. If He's closing it, it means it's not aligned with your destiny. That's still God moving. Spiritually, this demands a shift in how we see the world. Every encounter, every delay, every obstacle becomes a potential vessel for God's movement. The stranger who gives you advice at just the right time, the closed door that forces you onto a better path, the hardship that teaches you gratitude. All of these are ways God is answering prayers, if only you have the eyes to see it. This is why it's dangerous to pray and then keep your mind closed. You can't say, "God, I trust you," and then ignore every answer that doesn't fit your script. That's not trust, that's control. Trust is saying, "God, however you choose to move, I'm open. Whether you use people, circumstances, or even obstacles, I'll recognize your hand in it." That level of openness takes humility, but it also brings peace. Because now you're not just looking for one specific outcome. You're watching for God everywhere. So the next time you pray, don't limit your expectation to the spectacular. Pay attention to the ordinary. Watch how people show up in your life at the right moment. Notice how circumstances shift, how obstacles force you to grow, how even disappointments lead you closer to your purpose. God is moving all the time. You just have to widen your lens to see it. There's something about gratitude in prayer that shifts everything. You can pray with faith, you can wait with patience, but if you don't learn how to be grateful, you'll never fully unlock the movement of God in your life. Gratitude isn't just a polite thank you at the end of a prayer. Gratitude is a posture. It's a way of seeing life. It's an attitude that says, even before I see the answer, I'm already thankful. That's not weakness. That's trust at its highest level. See, most of us are conditioned to be grateful only after something happens. We get the promotion, then we give thanks. We recover from the illness, then we say we're grateful. But that's reactive gratitude. The kind of gratitude that shifts your prayer life is proactive gratitude. Thanking God before the blessing shows up. That's a declaration of trust. It's saying, I know you've heard me. I know you're working. And I'm so confident in what you're about to do that I can thank you in advance. Psychologically, gratitude rewires your entire state of being. Neuroscience has proven that gratitude reduces stress, improves focus, and increases resilience. When you shift from complaint to gratitude, your brain literally starts functioning differently. Instead of focusing on what you lack, you begin to see what you already have. That shift alone creates space for hope, and hope fuels endurance. It gives you strength to keep praying, keep believing, and keep moving. Philosophically, gratitude is profound because it challenges our natural desire for more. The human mind is restless. It always wants what's next. Gratitude grounds you. It reminds you that even if you never received another thing, you are already blessed. And here's the paradox. The more grateful you are for what you already have, the more open you become to receiving more. Gratitude doesn't just reflect trust. It attracts increase. Now, let me make this real. Think about how it feels when you give someone something and they act entitled. There's no appreciation, no recognition, just expectation. You're far less inclined to give again. But when someone receives with joy, with thankfulness, with humility, it stirs something inside you. You want to bless them again. Why? Because gratitude is magnetic. It pulls more into your life. The same is true in your relationship with God. Entitlement blocks blessings, but gratitude multiplies them. Here's another layer. Gratitude protects your heart while you wait. When the answer hasn't come yet, it's easy to slip into frustration, to let bitterness creep in. But when you choose gratitude, even in the waiting, you're guarding your spirit. You're saying, I may not have everything I want, but I thank God for what I do have. I thank Him for breath in my body, for another day to try again, for the lessons in the struggle, for the unseen ways He's been keeping me. That gratitude becomes armor. It shields you from negativity, from despair, from giving up. Spiritually, gratitude also signals maturity. Anybody can thank God when life is easy, but it takes depth to thank Him when life is hard. It takes maturity to say, Lord, I don't understand this storm, but I thank you anyway, because I trust that even in this you're working for my good. That's grown faith. That's the kind of trust that shifts atmospheres and moves mountains. And here's the beauty of it. Gratitude doesn't just change your relationship with God, it changes your relationships with people. When you live in gratitude, you stop taking people for granted. You start appreciating the small gestures, the little moments, the everyday blessings that others overlook. And when you start to live like that, your whole energy changes. People feel it. Doors open. Opportunities flow, because gratitude creates abundance even before abundance shows up. So let me challenge you with this. Stop waiting until you get the answer to be grateful. Start thanking God now. Thank Him for the prayers that haven't been answered yet. Thank Him for the doors that are still closed, because maybe those doors aren't for you. Thank Him for the lessons you're learning in the waiting. Thank Him for keeping you even when you didn't know you were being kept. Gratitude isn't just something you practice after the blessing. It's how you invite the blessing in.